Morning, everybody. Welcome to another Kerfuffle showcase. I am delighted and excited to have Luke joining us from the other side of the world, as it's affectionately known, from HomeLive. How are you, Luke? You okay?
I'm very well, mate. How are you?
Good. Basking
Excellent.
in our English summer. So it's probably only about 4 or 5 degrees colder than your winter there in Sydney.
I was going to say, what's that, a balmy 8 degrees Celsius?
Yeah.
Or
Pink suntan now, just ready to come out.
I'm glad in the first 10 seconds we've kind of got the rivalry kicked off already. That's great.
That's always well. We're sick of all this innovative tech you keep throwing our way, basically. So yeah. Let's kick straight off into that then, Lou. Yeah. You want to give us just a bit of background again here in terms of bit of background behind HomeLive. What this obviously you're coming across from Australia there, so just give us a brief bit of history about starting there and then why you're coming over here to the UK.
Sure. So where it actually started was that I guess taking a little bit of a step back. So I'd lived in Silicon Valley for many years and recently returned to Australia. Met John Tyson, who subsequently became my business partner. And so we were sort of doing a bit of research and development into augmented reality on phones. Nowadays, that's relatively easy to do. At the time when we were doing this, it was still reasonably complex stuff to figure out. And we built an augmented reality business card video prototype thing. And in our office in Sydney is in a suburb called Double Bay, where there are a lot of real estate agents around. And we it actually just sort of triggered this discussion about real estate, and we thought that might be an interesting product for them. So we literally started walking into real estate offices around our area and just chatting with real estate professionals on the, agents, property managers, office owners, and so forth, about their use of technology. And we almost immediately binned the augmented reality stuff. But what we uncovered was that there was this real gap in the way that technology was supporting real estate professionals. And so we started kind of iterating through that and figuring out ways that we could really sort of pointedly solve that problem. And where we arrived at was a live streaming solution. But I think it's worth kind of thinking about exactly where that fits into the kind of the transaction for agents. And so the way we think about it is you've got awareness, which is what portals do, and signboards and local papers and all of those sort of top of funnel, to use a bit of a nerdy term, but like all of those awareness tools, and they're very good at that. Yeah. But historically, from that, the next key step has been attendance of some kind. In Australia, it tends to be more open inspections or, private inspections or whatever it might be. But between those two steps, you are losing the vast majority of your audience, and you're sort of paying for that audience over and over again. Yeah. And so we felt that there was a gap in the market between that awareness and attendance around engagement. And so we think of HomeLive as being a remote engagement platform. And the key driver of that is through a live streaming experience that's really purpose built for real estate.
And clearly, it's a product of the times. It's never more relevant than obviously what we're all seeing. Lockdown. I mean, we were just talking off camera, weren't we? Obviously, unfortunately for you guys, like in a number of cities here, unfortunately, has gone back into lockdown, hasn't it?
Yes.
We've had a few of the towns and cities around here sort of similar there. So it's an uneasy picture for us for the time being yet, isn't it? But that does mean that you really need to be making, regardless of the fact whether you think the trend is going forwards, which I think we all accept it is, you need to just be making preparations for that anyway, don't you?
Absolutely. And the way I kind of think about that point in particular is if we were having this conversation a year ago, then I would talk to you about macro trends of live streaming across industries and all this sort of stuff. And I would say that maybe 5 years from now, live streaming will be a really kind of commonplace, if not ubiquitous, part of real estate discovery and engagement and so on. Yeah. COVID came, and that whole time frame has just been brought forward where, certainly as a small company, our plans have radically changed over the last 6 months as a result of basically the entire world of real estate has kind of been like, oh, okay, we need a different way to kind of continue transacting and interacting with people. And I think really importantly, there is a lot of technology out there that does kind of, I guess, put the agent or the real estate professional into a bit of a side seat, whereas the solution that we really focus on is keeping the agent front and center. They're trying to keep in mind that this is fundamentally a human-powered industry. And so how do you develop tools that will allow real estate professionals to really, bring to the foreground their skill set,
Yeah. Well, let's just pretend that we did have this conversation a year ago, and then we'll look really intelligent in terms of
backdated somehow. Yeah.
What I like the macro trends. I'm all over macro trends. So we called it last year, Luke, if you remember.
I'll send you our information memorandum. It goes into great detail on that. Yeah.
Perfect. Just as a complete aside, and because it's something I'm vaguely interested in, why do you think that augmented reality, certainly to date, has failed to capture the imagination?
Ooh, great question. I think, so I think with, there's a sort of old adage around like, what are the drivers of innovation? And they've sort of been military applications, and porn has sort of always been the sort of joking, but not really joking thing about a lot of sort of internet technologies. I think in the case of augmented reality and VR, the use cases have not really been well established. So, and I've kind of been through this before. So the first tech company I was involved in was doing mobile tech, where everyone was sort of still thinking this is what a phone was for. And we started talking about more how it's actually more about this kind of interaction. We take that for granted today, but we had to figure out what those use cases were. It wasn't automatically evident that it was going to have the sort of applications that we use our phones for now. And I think there's a similar thing going on with AR and VR where, there's tremendous potential there. But the hard work is still ahead for us as innovators to kind of figure out what are those really powerful use cases that are not sort of gimmicky and don't really have long-term value. And I think built environments is for sure one of those areas. Like real estate is definitely going to be a driver of some of those technologies. I think the second issue is the interactions have been a little clunky. Like, sort of holding your phone out to kind of view a augmented reality is, in 10 years we'll look back and go, oh my God, that's so retro and weird that we thought that was actually worth doing, And then on the VR side, like I've got a VR machine right here. It's like not everyone's going to make that investment,
Of course. I think, it's interesting, actually. We're seeing a bit of a return of the QR code over here. Obviously,
from COVID as well.
It's amazing. Yeah, it's amazing. And actually, I don't know whether it's now just because certainly with the latest Apple phones, when you just hold the photo over it rather than having to have a distinct app, it picks it up automatically. And it feels like augmented reality is kind of like where maybe QR codes were a little bit further back, So it's the first wave, obviously, there. Obviously, you go away, learn the lessons, and come back. And again, that's the reason why I asked that question originally was there have been obviously live streaming tools in the past that have tried to get this going, and for whatever reason they haven't captured the imagination. Do you think it literally just comes down to a combination of the technology and the innovation you guys have finally been able to deliver, and that dual effect of actually we absolutely desperately need these things because of the challenge we're facing in the marketplace at the moment and in the wider world?
Yeah, live streaming has, sort of notionally been around for 20 years, right? And so there's always been some version of it. There is definitely a progression of the technology that allows you to deliver like low latency streaming, like real time, kind of like we're doing now. So there is kind of that part to it, but I think the way we think about it is that the actual live stream itself is somewhat of a commodity. In terms of the technical challenges of doing a live stream, they're not massive challenges anymore. It's really the productization around that that's really key. And so, like you might say to me, like, why would I use this instead of Facebook Live or Zoom or something like that? Which is a fair question, because it's kind of that's what people have had most exposure to right now. And the way I think about that is that, Zoom is a fabulous tool. Like, I don't know how I would continue doing business without Zoom at the moment. And for business applications, it nails it. Facebook Live is different than, it uses a different set of technologies. It's built for a different purpose. And for entertainment applications, it's awesome. HomeLive is a purpose-built tool for real estate professionals. So we sweat all of those details about, like a really simple example, right? So we're doing this live stream and there's a bunch of people watching and they can chat to each other while we're talking. Now, that doesn't really translate particularly well in a real estate setting. You don't necessarily want those people to be able to interact with each other or to even be aware of each other. It's really about a set of individual dialogues between the viewer and the agent. So getting all of the details of those things right really matter. That's a very simple example, but there are, we could talk for hours just about all of the stuff behind the scenes, CRM integrations, all of that stuff that is real, and lead capture and
all that on the face of it, potentially quite boring stuff, but really important stuff to make sure that this delivers, isn't it, as a business application?
Yeah, because ultimately, what are you trying to achieve as an agent or a real estate professional, agent, property manager, developer, what have you? You're trying to, be more effective at either securing properties or selling those properties, right? And so, if that involves saving time, then that's a big tick. If it involves getting a better price or value or whatever, then that's a big tick. If you're going to do a Facebook live stream, the sort of lead follow-up capture, even knowing who they are and all of that stuff is really arduous at best. On the worst case, it's just not possible. So having all of that stuff purpose-built, pushed back into your CRM where you need it, like that's how you do it properly.
Okay, and how's the public taken to this? Obviously, we know that there's been a lot of take up by the agents.
Sorry, mate, you dropped out a bit there.
I was just going to say, how are the actual? I was just going to say, how are the general public actually receiving it? How are they? What's the feedback they give you and the agents?
So the general public. So anecdotally, it's always been a no-brainer. Like if you say to a person, would you like to be able to sort of have a live interaction through a property from the comfort of your own home or in your office or on your phone or whatever? That's always been a very strong and clear signal for us. We actually decided to get some more specific data points around that recently. So we've just finished a bunch of studies on both the home buyer and renter side and on the vendor landlord side. So I can actually give you some specifics if you want to know. So I've got a couple of highlights here. So the one that really took us by surprise, like I knew this number would be high, but I didn't think it was going to be quite this high, is on the buyer side, 97% would prefer to view a live stream prior to any kind of physical inspection.
Yeah.
Even and that's when you include COVID in it. When you take COVID out, it drops to 84%. But that's still an overwhelming number of people who are just like, I don't even want to see the property in person until I can kind of get a bit of a walkthrough and a feel for it and then decide.
And I don't know why we are surprised, but why we should be surprised actually, but because it makes perfect sense if you think about it from your own point of view, but those are really high figures, aren't they?
Yeah, it's very clear. I mean, another one on the buy side is 76% would request a live stream if they knew that was an available option. So I think the takeaway for us from that is that you can't just sort of sit there and expect the general public to ask you for this. You need to kind of send up the signal flare to say, hey, I'm an agent that offers this as a service.
Yeah.
On the vendor side, I think globally this dynamic of, a supply problem or a demand problem is kind of constantly shifting based on lockdowns and fear and all of that stuff. But on the vendor side, we've got 92% of people who have either sold in the last year or intend to sell in the next year. 92% want further qualifying of buyers before anyone's invited into a physical viewing. And the one that really jumped out for me is 79% are more likely to select an agent that offers live streaming than one who doesn't. So if you're trying to get more listings, you got to highlight that you do live streaming.
I mean, definitely. I mean, that's really kind of you to share those stats. We love obviously hearing that straight from the horse's mouth, as it were. Please share those. Put them up on your landing page on the site, because I think those are really, really key figures there for agents to understand. And okay, they're Australian there, but I guarantee they're going to be between.
These are not Australian figures. So we can stratify this by socioeconomic status, by region, by all sorts of things. I can tell you by employment status. Like it's quite comprehensive.
I was just going to say, I thought they were Aussie, and I thought they would be, they would still match very closely, because actually those overwhelming social trends tend to they're very, very close together for countries like ourselves, don't they? Yes. Things like how addicted we all are to Facebook, Apple fans, all that. There's not much variance, really, is there, when you look at these sorts of things? That's fascinating. That's really, really interesting there. And do you have many agents over there that use this to drive, if you like, the scarcity value? So trying to, some of our agents over here will have confidential properties, they will have confidential lists. So doing that initial launch to that confidential list of maybe investors and buyers, is that something you've seen developing over there, and you expect to see happen here as well?
Yeah, 100%. So what I was saying before about, between the awareness and attendance, that's kind of your conventional marketing strategy. You put it out on the portals and so forth, and continue from there. One of the other use cases that we've seen becoming, very popular is driving the perceived value of being on a real estate officer's database. Yeah. Because if you speak to the consumers and say, what is the perceived value of being on one of these databases, it's not that high. And so it's like, well, I get spammed a lot, But if you say, we're doing live walkthroughs of these properties, they're not on the market yet, this is a VIP velvet rope kind of experience, and tune in, this is just for our members of our database, all of a sudden the perceived value of being on that database goes through the roof. So I think that is absolutely an important use case, and that comes through in a lot of what we do with HomeLive, in terms of for example, in Australia, a lot of the real estate marketing costs relate to on a per property basis, whereas we charge on a just flat fee for an agent. So it doesn't have to be wrapped up in the sort of marketing budget discussion with vendors.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense as well. And look, Luke, there's clearly a lot of obviously next generation marketing products out there now. Virtual staging, 3D. Where does live streaming fit into that? Is it complementary? Are they competitive? How do you see it all fitting together?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. There's obviously all the conventional, photos and pre-recorded videos and so forth. I guess my take on that is that things like 3D models and so forth, they all kind of sit in the category of a piece of content. And so you create that content and you put it out into the world, wherever your different places are that you market. I guess the issue with those things is that they become commoditized. So as soon as you put it out there, you're putting it into as many places as possible, and the content lives out there, and you're essentially relying on the initiative of home buyers and so forth to reach out to you to say, I'm interested, right? Live streaming is a bit different. It's not just a piece of content, but it's a medium. And so again, back to the question of what is live streaming done properly for real estate mean? I think part of that is that it leverages all of those things. Like, yes, we are we're compatible with all of that. If you're doing those 3D walkthroughs and all that, it's awesome technology. I love all of it. Like, I massively geek out on it, and the folks who build that stuff are amazing. And it's a really nice way to generate that initial awareness of your property that you can then harness in a live stream and say, okay, let's now build rapport with each other. Let's engage. Let me walk you through the property. If you want to ask me to take you out on the balcony and listen for traffic or hear the birds or see a view or whatever, we can do that. You love it. Let's go and tee up a time for you to come and have a look in person.
Okay. And I mean, you've touched on it already, but why HomeLive is better than the likes of Facebook or Zoom, as in being specific there. I guess what you were just talking about there, though, as well, is that ability to be able to communicate with the person going around the property, and as I understand it, you can have sort of open questions, can't you? And you can have closed questions. So if you literally just want to ask the agent a specific question and only you know about it, that's possible with your platform, isn't it?
That's right. So unlike Facebook Live or YouTube Live or whatever, we don't indicate the number of viewers, and the questions that are being asked are private between each viewer and the agent. The whole point of that is that it allows the streamer, let's just call them the streamer, to have control over that interaction. So we tend to see that there's sort of two categories of questions that come up. One are what we call the steering questions, where it's like, hey, Simon, can you kind of go back to the balcony for me? Yeah. And then there's the commercial questions like, this is great, can you flick me a contract, or can you call me, or whatever it might be. In both those scenarios, I think it's useful for the streamer to have control over how they curate that. So if you're asking me a commercial question, I can just sort of acknowledge it and say, sure, I'll give you a buzz afterwards. Yeah. Or for the steering questions, it's like, you don't want to break your flow as you're walking through the property and sort of doing your spiel and getting all the key touch points. You can say, a few of you are asking me to return to the balcony, so I'll just finish whipping around and then I'll take you out there. And if you've got any more questions, we can cover them there as well. It's really about allowing the streamer to, do it the way they want to do it, while being sensitive to the questions that they're getting along the way.
I encourage anyone to get in contact. Go via the landing page, obviously, on Kerfuffle. Go to HomeLive, have a look at their website as well. Just mention us if you want to take advantage of that deal. Luke, if you could share those, and please in the future, just keep us up to date with any more of those stats and that research, because that's some really interesting stuff.
We've got a lot of it. We'll share it for sure.
Great, we'll get that up on a blog for you as well. So best of luck with it, and we'll stay in contact, and it'll be really interesting to see how this develops, and we'll certainly ask for some people to give us live feedback in the next session as well, and start seeing how people are using it.
Fantastic, sounds good. Thank you very much.
Have a good one. Cheers, mate.
Bye-bye.